What's up, everybody? We are now at the home stretch of the Diddy trial. We are in closing arguments, prosecution finished, defense is going tomorrow, and then deliberations start. Is it possible we would have a verdict as soon as Friday? Yes, but probably unlikely. I don't know if the judge is going to let them go immediately into deliberation, which he probably will. How long they're going to take. If it ends up being a hung jury, that could take a long time before we receive anything. And if it's guilty, again, we don't know how long it's going to take. But we're going to be here every step of the way covering it. So, of course, if you are new here, of course, make sure to hit that follow button. Now, for my friends who are watching on TikTok, because you guys are always there, you don't get to see everything that Insta, Facebook, and YouTube sees with regard to pictures and things like that. So if you want to hop over to YouTube, now is the time to do it. And then you'll be able to see the photos, the sketches, and stuff that we're going to be showing today in regard to this trial. Now, real quick before I begin with the closing arguments, I do want to let you guys know something else about another trial that we're watching. Bryan Kohberger, the Idaho 4. The judge officially said today that he wasn't really buying this second perpetrator assailant story, and he wasn't going to delay the trial any longer. So the trial for Bryan Kohberger for the Moscow, Idaho 4 murders will begin August 11th, and we will be covering that as well. Now, all of that being said, here's kind of what's been going down today. Prosecution started their closing arguments today in regard to the Diddy trial. Both cases rested. Defense rested theirs in 10 minutes, which is kind of quick, without calling witnesses. And we're going to hear what they have to say tomorrow. At this point, people ask me, what do I think is going to happen? And I don't know. If I was going to put a bet on anything right now, I would say hung jury, because I don't know if prosecution, and we can talk about this a little bit more, I don't know if prosecution made their case. I do think that they brought up a lot of stuff that really kind of proves RICO, in my opinion. But it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the jury thinks. And there's a few other aspects of this that I'll just bring up. One in particular we talked about is this jury makeup is 8 men, 4 women. Okay. And, I'm just going to put it very bluntly. When you're looking at Cassie and Jane, there is a very cyclical pattern of abuse going on there. I don't think anybody who's been through any type of abusive relationship will deny that you see the love bombing, the coming back will be better, and then the continued circle of this until Cassie specifically finally got to a point that she was ready to leave. My concern is that men aren't going to see that and see them as willing participants, not as participating as a purpose of surviving and not trying to rock the boat. That is my concern. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. Now, real quick, the other thing that I want to address before we get into this, is the stuff that happened yesterday. Okay. Now, what happened yesterday was some aspects of the charges, certain charges were dropped, and I want to be very clear about what that means. So RICO is an umbrella. There's a bunch of charges under there. Okay. He's still charged with RICO. He's still charged with trafficking. He's still charged with transporting a prostitution for interstate, whatever it was, interstate transportation of prostitution. He's still charged with all of those. They took out some lesser charges. So basically they took out aiding and abetting on the trafficking, but he's still charged with trafficking. They just took out that section of it. They took out attempted kidnapping, and they took out attempted arson. So that's what they took out. It's still, the stuff is still there. They just took out attempted. So it's been very confusing. The charges are all still there. It's not lesser charges. They're basically just trying to streamline things and make it easier for the jury. That's kind of where it's at. I'm not fully convinced that on the arson one, they did a great job bringing it to Kid Cudi's car and tying it back. I think that the circumstantial evidence is definitely there. He was definitely there, allegedly. But I don't know if prosecution did a great job tying that back to the jury. Just saying. But now let's get on. Let's get on with it. Let's get into what you guys want to hear. So today, June 26th was short, but it was anything but quiet, right? The prosecution officially kicked off closing arguments at Diddy's trafficking and racketeering trial. An Assistant U.S. attorney, Christy Slavik, is the one who went straight for the jugular with this. All right. The judge opened the day by laying out the plan that today will be all prosecution. Tomorrow, it will be all defense. We're expecting tomorrow Mark Agnifilo, who is Diddy's lead attorney, to start at 9 a.m. sharp. After that, the government will get one final word in rebuttal. Then the judge will issue the jury instructions, and from there, deliberations begin. The jury will control its own schedule once they're dismissed to deliberate. But let's get into the substance of today, because Slavik came in like a hammer. So today's argument didn't just hit the highlights, it pulled the entire case into a brutal, organized pattern. She told the jury that this wasn't about random incidences, that it was about power, pattern, control. She drew a straight line between two assaults, one on March 16th, 2016, the other on June 24th, 2024. One obviously involves Cassie Ventura, who was being violently assaulted at the Intercontinental Hotel, and the other one in June of 2024, when Jane was violently assaulted and attacked. They were 8 years apart, but in Christy Slavik's own words, they're not separate stories. They're all chapters in the same book. And who wrote that book? Sean Combs. She also said the story of Sean Combs and the criminal enterprise that he led made up of his inner circle. She told the jury that Diddy's circle, which was his bodyguards, managers, employees, assistants, weren't just bystanders, they were part of it. The entire enterprise existed, in her words, to service the defendant's every desire through a methodical pattern of violence, coercion, and manipulation. According to the government, this wasn't a chaotic mess. It was structured. It was deliberate. They explained that Combs wasn't just powerful. He became more powerful and more dangerous precisely because of the people around him, the support system, the enablers. She told the jury that the defendant was a very powerful man, but he became more powerful and more dangerous because of the support of his inner circle and his businesses, aka the enterprise. And the purpose of that enterprise was one thing: to serve and protect the defendant, Sean Combs. Now, that being said, so I got to change my picture. Yeah, by the way, if you're coming in late real quick, or you're on TikTok, you're not going to see the pictures of sketches that we have going on. If you want to jump over to YouTube, and if you come in late, this is always saved on the Sean Diddy Combs playlist. You can definitely go watch it there. Now, she then hit another point hard. That point was silence. She said that Diddy counted on silence, that he expected that the defendant counted on silence and shame to keep his crimes hidden. He believed that his fame, wealth, and power made him untouchable, but Christy Slavik told the jury that those illusions were shattered during this trial. Quote, he thought that his fame, wealth, and power put him above the law, but over the course of this trial, his crimes have been exposed. She listed every way this enterprise worked to keep him on top, promoting and protecting his reputation, fulfilling his personal and sexual desires, enabling his inner circle to commit crimes, shielding the whole operation from law enforcement detection. And at the center of it, Slavik reminded the jury, remember, it's his kingdom. Everyone was there to serve him. Now, after Christy Slavik set the stage, she got a little bit methodical. She told the jury that now it's time to walk through the actual charges, the crimes, the law, the proof. She pulled up a PowerPoint and began, because that's what everybody wants to see, pulled up a PowerPoint and began guiding the jury through count one, racketeering conspiracy, which is the backbone of the government's case here. Okay? Here's what she said that they had to prove. One, that there was a conspiracy to participate in the Combs enterprise. Two, the enterprise affected interstate or foreign commerce. Three, that Sean Combs knowingly and willfully joined the conspiracy. And four, he agreed either he or someone else in the group would commit at least 2 racketeering crimes. And then she clarified something very critical. When she says the enterprise, she's not talking about Combs Enterprises, which is the official company name. She's saying that the real enterprise that was there existed to serve his needs, and what he said went. And that the enterprise was Diddy and his trusted inner circle, his enablers, his fixers, his soldiers. She didn't just speak in broad terms either. She gave names and faces. She showed a jury a photo of Christina Coram, who was his longtime chief of staff, and called her one of Combs' most loyal lieutenants. She knew where the defendant was and what he was doing at all times. She made the defendant's life her life. Then she expanded that inner circle. His security team, some of whom had been with him for years, were more than just his bodyguards. According to prosecution, they were armed, loyal, and dangerous, saying that those lieutenants were particularly loyal and they were armed and ready. They were at the defendant's side for some of the most violent and threatening acts. And then came the assistants, what she deemed as the foot soldiers of the operation. They didn't flinch. If Combs gave the order, or if Coram or security relayed it, they followed through, even if it meant facilitating a crime. Now, real quick before we go on and talking about more of the people, the terminology that she's using here is very mafia, which is where RICO kind of originated from, was to take down organized crime and to take down the mafia, right? And so those are the terms that she's using when she's talking about lieutenants and foot soldiers and that he's the top of it. She's building this as if it was a mob organization. And when you're talking about New Yorkers, people from New York, New Jersey, et cetera, I mean, they're all in New York, you know about the 5 families, you know about, the mob. And that's kind of what I think she's trying to relate it to, as well as organized crime, of course. Now, that being said, let's get back into it. She's saying that they weren't volunteers, that they were paid well, very well. She reminded the jury that Brendan Paul, who was Combs' assistant, testified that he earned $100,000 a year. And then she said that KK, Christina Coram, made 6 times that, $600,000 a year, saying, quote, the kind of money that didn't just buy talent, that it bought obedience, saying the defendant used the money and the gravitas from his businesses to facilitate the crimes that he and his inner circle committed. He was the boss, not in name only, not symbolically. He was the boss of every member of his inner circle, and he was the one in charge. And even as the cast of characters changed over time because assistants came and went, bodyguards shifted, Combs was the constant. He was the through line, and the other members worked with each other and with him throughout the entire conspiracy. The prosecution then continued in their closing argument, saying, turning to the core of the government's burden, which is the racketeering case. She told the jury clearly that they must unanimously find Sean Diddy Combs knowingly and willfully agreed that he or someone in his inner circle would commit at least 2 racketeering acts. And according to Christy Slavik, there's no shortage of option. She rattled off the categories of the crimes Combs and his team are alleged to have committed. Substance distribution, kidnapping, arson, bribing witnesses, facilitating trafficking of both Cassie Ventura and Jane, travel facilitation for commercial sex involving girlfriends and male escorts, for forced labor, and covering up Combs' crimes. And I think that 2 of those, my opinion, are very easy to hit. Number 1 is the travel facilitation for commercial sex, because he did hire escorts and flew them everywhere. That was travel facilitation of commercial sex. That was the prostitutes. That was the male escorts. On top of that, covering up his crimes, you only have one. You only need one of those, right? And when you look at him bribing it to get rid of that security footage, that's another one. Those 2 alone, without anything else, could get him convicted of RICO. All right. But what I just read to you, those items, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things, that is a menu essentially that the jury gets to choose from. And the evidence proves, and Slavik says that the evidence proves the conspiracy because this was a pattern, not an accident. Next, Slavik drilled down on the substance distribution, a crime she says wasn't just present, it was foundational to Diddy's operation. That substances were an essential ingredient of every freak-off, the way the defendant kept Cassie and Jane awake and compliant in rooms for days. They told the jury that this wasn't an occasional use, it was systematic. He fed them substances for years, and he didn't get those substances on his own. He used his enterprise to get them. According to her, Combs directed his assistants in security to obtain the narcotics, and during the 2024 searches, law enforcement recovered cocaine, methamphetamine, ketamine, and ecstasy from his homes. But Slavik reminded the jury that the amount isn't what matters. The law requires that a co-conspirator knowingly distributed the substances. Once he had them, they said that he gave them to Cassie and Jane. This is substance distribution, plain and simple. That somebody brought them to him, and he doled them out. Then the prosecution brought the jury back to Capricorn Clark's testimony. If you guys remember her, she was in fact, let me tell you the picture. I'll put the picture up of her, the thing. There we go. She was one of his former employees who testified in late May. She reminded the jury of an incident in 2004 where she was allegedly locked in a building by Diddy's security team and forced to take a lie detector for 5 days straight. She said, quote, security locked Capricorn in the building and made her take a lie detector test over and over and over for 5 days. Capricorn was petrified. Slavik also said that the man administering the test told her, if you fail, they're going to throw you in the East River. Slavik then stressed the coercion. She didn't consent to this. She didn't want to be in that building taking the test, but what choice did she have? Capricorn believed genuinely that if she didn't comply, she would die. The prosecution framed this as yet another act of intimidation and violence used to maintain control. Finally, Slavik turned to one of the most visceral moments of the trial, Cassie Ventura's 2009 assault and forced hotel stay. She reminded jurors of Cassie's testimony that after Diddy stomped on her face in a car, she tried to flee, but his security guard brought her back. From there, Combs forced her to stay in a hotel for a full week while she healed. She wasn't free to leave on her own. His staff brought her food and clothes. His security guarded the door. And his former assistant, David James, confirmed the story. He remembered bringing her ice cream during that week-long lockdown. She didn't mince words, saying, quote, this is kidnapping. It's clear that Cassie did not consent to stay at the London hotel, but she had no choice. The defendant told her she couldn't leave. He had a security team telling her she couldn't leave, and Cassie knew what happened when people said no to the defendant. She then pushed deeper into her closing argument, and she dropped one of the most explosive moments of the entire trial. She reminded the jury of Capricorn Clark's testimony. The day in December of 2011 when Sean Combs showed up at her door with a gun and told her, "Get dressed, we're going to kill Cuddy." And when she hesitated, he said, "I don't give a fuck what you want to do. Go get dressed." So what did she do? She got dressed. She got in the car with Combs and one of his security guards, and they drove to Kid Cudi's home. According to the testimony, Combs then trespassed onto the property. Later that same day, Capricorn Clark said Combs wouldn't let her out of his sight until she brought Cassie Ventura back to him, and she did. She testified that when Ventura showed up, Combs kicked her to the ground right in front of his house. Cassie backed that up with a similar testimony. Two separate witnesses, same violent story. And Slavik made the purpose of it all very clear. The enterprise's purpose was to protect its leader, not to protect Cassie, not to protect Capricorn. Then they turned to the Porsche incident, what came next. When in January of 2012, Kid Cudi's Porsche was firebombed, someone cut open the roof and dropped a Molotov cocktail inside. And while Combs didn't light the match, Slavik said what everyone was thinking. Of course the defendant was behind this. She said the government isn't claiming Diddy physically torched the car. In her words, we're not suggesting the defendant personally cut the hole in Kid Cudi's Porsche. You heard the audio notes. The defendant didn't even buy his own soup. But motive, opportunity, and warning signs are all there. And if you remember right, and this was not in part of the closing argument, but if you remember right, when the law enforcement that showed up at Kid Cudi's house, or Kid Cudi was on the thing, testified, they said that when they got to his house, there was a black Escalade parked out there. And as soon as the police left or got there, that black Escalade took off. The officer took down the plate number, and that plate was registered to none other than Bad Boy Records, which is the car that Capricorn Clark claimed she was in during her testimony. Now, Slavik then pointed the jury straight to Cassie Ventura's testimony, where she said Combs told her he was going to have Cudi's car blown up while he was out of the country. And then 2 weeks later, boom, Molotov cocktail, a burned out Porsche, just like he said. She then referenced a December 2011 email Ventura sent detailing multiple threats from Combs, threatened to hurt her and Kid Cudi. He said he wouldn't do it with his own hands, and he promised to be out of the country when it happened. Slavik hammered the timeline. What are the odds that the car the defendant just said he was going to blow up got blown up, and the coincidences keep coming? She walked the jury through the pattern, the email with the threat, the arson 2 weeks later, a meeting between Cudi and Combs where Cudi said Combs looked like a Marvel supervillain. And after that meeting, everything stopped. No more attacks, no more threats. And years later, Combs even apologized to Kid Cudi. Slavik said this is quite a collection of coincidences, but of course you know that it's not a coincidence. You know what happened here. Then she went on with her closing argument with a chilling detail that underscores the reach of his enterprise, and that's bribery. She walked the jury through what happened in March of 2016 after Combs assaulted Cassie Ventura in the elevator lobby at the Intercontinental Hotel, of course. As security guard Israel Flores responded to the scene, Combs tried to hand him a stack of money, a payoff, plain and simple. Flores testified that he refused the money. Slavik pointed this out. He didn't know the defendant had just beaten Cassie in a public area of the hotel, but the defendant knew what he did. Combs wasn't just trying to cover up a scene. He was covering up a crime. They told the jury that the defendant knew what he had done and knew the potential consequences. He knew that he could be arrested if the police knew what he did to Cassie at that hotel. But the police never got involved. And according to Slavik, Combs went into manipulation mode. After Ventura fled the hotel, Combs started calling and texting her repeatedly, more than a dozen times. At one point, he even told her that he was being arrested, which was a lie. Slavik said this was psychological warfare. He was manipulating her, trying to guilt her, trying to regain that control. And then his inner circle stepped in to clean up the mess for him. Christina Korm, his chief of staff at the time, started tracking down surveillance footage. D-Rock, his lead security guard, was monitoring Ventura's movements. And this wasn't a company reaction. It was a coordinated operation to contain exposure. Another example of how the enterprise protected its leader, not the victims. Then Slavik pulled the jury back, the heart of the case, trafficking. She said that the jury could and can and should find that Combs' enterprise enabled the trafficking of Cassie Ventura and Jane, that it was part of the conspiracy, not separate from it. The charges, 2 counts of sex trafficking, 1 for Cassie, 1 for Jane. And according to Slavik, the government proved Combs used threats, substances, lies, manipulation, and violence to force both women into sex acts with male escorts for his entertainment. But she made one thing crystal clear, that this is not an attempt to criminalize dysfunctional relationships or unconventional sexual preferences. She acknowledged that both Cassie and Jane initially agreed to try things like the freak-offs and hotel nights, but the law doesn't require all of it to be forced, just some of it. And the law doesn't require that they explicitly said no or tried to escape either. Then came a gut punch. She showed the jury a slide with 27 men. 27 men, strangers that Combs allegedly hired to have sex with Cassie, Jane, or both, saying that this slide shows you just a subset of the strangers who had sex with Jane and Cassie. It wasn't just a disturbing image. It was a statement about scale, about the deliberate nature of the trafficking, and about the way Combs used other men as tools for humiliation and control. Then came the love bombing. Christy Slavik didn't just describe what happened to Jane. She broke down exactly how it happened. She told the jury about Jane's sex trafficking charge wasn't about a single incident, but a long pattern of fraud, coercion, and force. And it started out with what she called a classic example of love bombing. Back in January 21, when Jane first got involved with Combs, Slavik said he showered her with gifts and affection to condition her. He primed her to do exactly what he wanted her to do, and she spent the rest of their relationship chasing that intense feeling of love. Slavik said that was the setup, then came the grooming. She then reminded the jury of Jane's testimony, how Combs slowly introduced her to freak-offs, presenting them as just part of the lifestyle. We referenced Jane's first hotel night, where she said that she went along with it because she was high and wanted to please her partner. But after it was over, he said that she felt like she had opened Pandora's box. That's exactly what she said, verbatim. Slavik emphasized that Jane continued doing these hotel nights for a while, but she never wanted to sleep with other men. Eventually, she started to resist. This wasn't exploration, it was exploitation, what Slavik argued. Real quick, because I see some people coming in comments. I'll take a pause before I get to this next section. If you are coming in late and you want to see this, certain things, certain issues that people are asking questions about that might have already been answered, if you go to the Sean Diddy Combs playlist on Just in the Nick of Crimes YouTube, you can rewind this show to the very beginning and watch all of it and get caught up on everything that we're doing. So just want to kind of let you guys know that. And again, for my TikTok friends, if you want to jump over, we're showing some of the sketches that were done today and a few other images. If you want to see those, you won't see them on TikTok. But if you don't care, just stay right where you are. And of course, if you are new here, please consider hitting that follow button. It's something free that you can do that supports my content. Now, that being said, Slavik exposed the tools that Combs used to control James, saying the defendant dangled different carrots to make Jane continue doing hotel nights, trips, shopping sprees, promises, but there was always a catch. Only after spending a night in a hotel. And those promises, most of them never came true. They were just lies he told Jane to keep her participating. But in April 2023, Combs gave her a different kind of carrot. This one had teeth. He started paying her rent. Slavik said this marks an escalation. The defendant's coercive pattern picked up steam when he started paying her rent, because once he had that control, he used it. Whenever Jane tried to say no, Combs threatened to stop paying, and in their relationship, started feeling obligated because the defendant was paying her rent and threatening to stop. Then Slavik dropped one of the most powerful moments of her close, which was an audio message from Sean Combs to Jane. He sent it in August of 2023 when Jane was resisting a hotel night Combs wanted to plan with 3 entertainers. In the recording, Combs tells her, "Ain't nobody threatening you," but then he says, "You're in for a rude awakening. You better get on your job. You got me on my job." Slavik told the jury what Jane testified. She knew exactly what he meant. Get on your job means do the hotel night, because he was paying her rent because he's the one that had the power. She closed that point with this. He may say it's not a threat, but the messages couldn't have been clearer. Threatening to take away her home could turn a no into a yes. That is coercion, and it worked. As Christy Slavik neared the end of her closing argument, she reminded the jury of the lawsuit Cassie Ventura filed in November of 2023. She told them about how it mirrored something deeply personal for Jane, because Jane had already been living that same nightmare. Jane already had been saying the same thing for months, that it bore a harrowing resemblance to what she was experiencing. After the lawsuit dropped, Jane sent Sean Combs a series of texts that cut through the spin and spoke volumes. Slavik read them aloud in court. "I feel like I'm reading my own sexual trauma. This was sexual exploitation that you framed as love for your sick fetishes. Slavik then played a recorded phone call between Combs and Jane, captured after the lawsuit. In it, Jane tried to explain how she was feeling, but Combs interrupted her, cutting her off in the moment she started speaking her truth. He presented her with a false narrative, and when the gaslighting didn't work, he shut her down. Jane stayed away from Combs for months after that call. Slavik then made it crystal clear that this wasn't confusion or miscommunication, that it was intentional. The defendant's conduct had one purpose: to get Jane to agree to do hotel nights. And because the defendant knew exactly what he was doing, that this was, in fact, sex trafficking. She laid out the legal standard. The jury doesn't need to find that Jane was coerced every time. They only need to find that at least one hotel night was the product of force, fraud, or coercion. She told them the fact that a victim consents once to a commercial sex act, that doesn't mean that she consented every single time. In this case, Jane made it very crystal clear that she was not consenting, yet the nights continued. Then, after that, continuing on, after Jane broke things off with Combs, she reached out to Christina Coram. She sent her a long, painful text in December of 23, pleading for intervention. Slavik read that text to the jury. Hey, I know I would normally not involve you in anything, but he just threatened me and my sex tapes. He just threatened me about my sex tapes that he has of me on 2 phones. He said that he would expose me and send them to my child's father. She continued, he's been bothering me for 2 months. After all I've been asking for is my space. Mind you, these are sex tapes where I'm heavily drugged and doing things that he asked of me for the past 3 years that I'm currently recovering from. It's also extremely hurtful, very hurtful, for him to exploit me all this time and then threaten me with sex tapes. I'm beyond hurt by him. And Coram replied with this: I always tell him all the time just to give you these things space, otherwise we will end up with a situation like we're in now. No shock, no outrage, just crisis management. Routine crisis management. Then she walked the jury through what happened in September of 2023, where Combs promised Jane that they wouldn't do a hotel night, that it would be just time together, the 2 of them. She texted him, I don't want to play this role in your life anymore. It's dark, sleazy, it makes me feel disgusted with myself. I feel it's the only reason you have me around and why you pay for the house. But Combs reassured her that things would be different. While she was mid-flight in New York, he sent her a message, I have a surprise for you. That surprise was a new male escort, someone Combs arranged through Cowboys for Angels, which was a service that he used frequently. And that was shown in evidence at the trial. Slavik said plainly, Combs enticed and transported Jane to get her on that plane by telling her a material line. That is sex trafficking. Then came October 2023, what Slavik called one of the clearest examples of coercion in this case. Jane had been telling Combs no over and over. She sent him texts before that night saying, I'm not a porn star. I'm not an animal. I need a break. But Combs kept pushing. He promised quality time, then flipped to threatening her home again. That stick is Jane's house that he's paying for, Slavik said. And when that didn't work, he pulled the sympathy card. He told Jane he was sick and needed her to take care of him. And that did it. Jane showed up, and before she knew it, she was in a hotel room sleeping with other men. It was the first hotel night she did sober. She was so overwhelmed, she vomited between the second and third man. And even when she vomited, Combs still wouldn't let her stop. Slavik summed it up in plain terms. The defendant knew Jane didn't want a hotel night that night. She told him that repeatedly. Look at her text. Look at her testimony. She did not want to sleep with strangers, but the defendant refused to take no for an answer. Then came what might be the most disturbing moment the jury heard this entire trial. Christy Slavik walked them through June 2024, a night that began with a date and ended with a violent, harrowing descent into physical assault and sex trafficking. According to Jane's testimony, things escalated quickly at her home. She admitted she started the argument slamming Combs' head on the kitchen counter, which, by the way, I would frame as reactive abuse. From there, it turned into a chase. She locked herself in room after room, and Combs kicked down 3 doors trying to get to her. When she attempted to flee the house, he kicked her legs out from under her, picked her up by the neck, and then choked her. Jane ran barefoot into the neighborhood and hid, thinking he had left. But when she returned, he was still there, and the violence then resumed. Combs allegedly punched and kicked her as she lay on the ground, then dragged her by her arm and hair back into the house from the backyard. After all that, once the chaos fizzled out, he told her to ice her face and get dressed because you're not going to ruin my fucking night. He then used her phone to text a male escort to come to the house. Once the escort arrived, Combs pulled Jane into the bathroom and demanded that she take ecstasy. You take this fucking pill, he told her. You're not going to ruin my fucking night. Jane resisted. She said she didn't want to. And then came the line that shook the courtroom. Is this coercion? Combs was asking her, is this coercion? He knew what he was doing. And Slavik turned that question back on the jury. Remember, at this point, he knew he was under investigation. He obviously knew what the crimes the feds were investigating. This, she said, wasn't ignorant. It was taunting. It was brazen acknowledgement that he was violating the very law he was being investigated for. So was this coercion, she asked? The answer couldn't be clearer. Slavik reminded the jury that Jane didn't want to sleep with the escort that night, but she was terrified, that she had been beaten, slapped, kicked, dragged. She was physically injured. She was emotionally shattered. And still Combs told her, are you going to go out there and suck his, and you know the rest? And she did. Jane, having been punched, slapped, kicked, and dragged for hours before, performed oral on the escort at the defense direction. She then told the jury, when the defendant asked Jane, is this coercion? That same night, he beat her and said, are you going to get out there and suck him? The answer to that is yes, it is coercion. And just in case the jury had any doubts about whether Combs understood the law or his actions, she said that there is no credible argument that Combs can make that he didn't know. He even used the word coercion. And to close that chapter, the defendant's assault in Jane's fear of further violence is the reason Jane slept with the escort that night, and the defendant knew that he coerced her. Remember, he only's got to be on one. Then Slavik zoomed out to the bigger picture. Years of manipulation and control, rent payments, powerful designer substances, threats to release sex tapes. These were Combs' tools. Slavik reminded the jury that Jane relied on substances to get through the hotel nights. They made her feel numb or at times even aroused, which only deepened the psychological hold that Combs had over her. They made it easier for her to get through these hotel nights. And when Jane began pushing back, he threatened to send tapes of her sleeping with other men while heavily drugged to the child's father, which is a way to get her to lose her kid. These are some of the most private, intimate, embarrassing moments of Jane's life. The defendant knows how powerful they are. So even when she wanted to say no, she couldn't say no to hotel nights without risking rent payments, without risking violent outbursts, or without risking the release of her tapes. According to the government, that is coercion. Now, then she moved on to count 2, which is sex trafficking involving Cassie Ventura. She didn't just describe a few incidents. She laid out an entire system of control, degradation, and domination that stretched across 10 years. Free calls became Ventura's job. It became her shame. Combs wasn't just her boyfriend. He was her boss, her label head, the man who signed her to Bad Boy Records when she was only 19 years old. He controlled her career, her image, her time. And a former assistant, David James, even testified that Combs bragged about her being moldable because she was so young. He said, I got her right where I want her. She's young. She was very moldable. That's what Combs said. Slavik then told the jury that's what defined the entire relationship. Age difference, power imbalance, naivety. The defendant wouldn't take no for an answer, and with Cassie, he thought he found someone who wouldn't even try. Then she said Ventura never did a freak off sober. Combs kept her supplied with substances until she became reliant on them. He also kept her financially trapped. He made her dependent on him. He paid for her car, phone, apartment, everything. And when she didn't obey, he would cut her off or send security to take things away. Slavik even brought up an incident where Combs demanded $20,000 from Combs' parents after finding out she was dating Kid Cudi. And it wasn't about the money because he had hundreds of millions of dollars coming in and out of that account specifically. So it wasn't about $20,000. It was about control. And remember, they had to take a loan out, a second mortgage, and then he wired the money right back. She told the jury that the freak offs were violent and degrading, and they lasted for years. Cassie testified that during them, she was covered in baby oil, made to wear uncomfortable outfits, and forced to participate while menstruating or sick. Why? Because it was a turn-on for him and humiliating for her. There were hundreds of them over the course of the relationship. Even when Cassie didn't want to do them, she still went along or pretended to. And just like with James, Combs filmed those encounters. The freak-offs themselves became a way of coercing her into doing more freak-offs. He used videos as leverage and as collateral. Saying, don't be fooled. Those videos were performances. She's following the defendant's direction, just like Jane did. Slavik then said there wasn't time to go over every violent incident because there were so many, but she listed several. In 2010, Combs beat her until Prince's security team had to intervene. In 2011, he beat her and threatened to release tapes after finding out she was seeing Kid Cudi. In 2015, during a trip to Jamaica, he dragged her down a hallway by her hair for taking too long to get ready. A witness, Carrie Morgan, says that her screams were guttural. Even her mother photographed her injuries, which were shown to the jury. The violence lasted the entire relationship, just like the freak-offs. And Cassie testified, "Make the wrong face, and the next thing I knew, I was getting hit in the face." Now, she continued. She called out the defense directly. She said, "They don't deny the abuse. The defense doesn't deny the abuse," and they don't. They don't deny it. It was in their opening statement. It was in their opening statements that you're not going to like him, that he might be a bad boyfriend, a bad partner. But that doesn't make him guilty of these things. That's what they said. And she said they don't deny the abuse because they don't. They just want to call it domestic violence. But Slavik said this wasn't an isolated outburst because the abuse was connected before, after, and during the freak-offs, the substances, the threats, the videos, the financial control, and all of it was part of the same system. Saying that this is an all or nothing situation. You only need to find that Cassie participated in even one freak-off because of the defendant's threats, force, or coercion. Then, to drive the point home, Christy played the March 2016 surveillance footage from the Intercontinental Hotel, the night he attacked her viciously in public view. The jury watched as Combs, wearing only a towel, ran down the hallway, kicked her, and dragged her back toward the hotel room, saying the defendant's not going to let her go. The freak-off isn't over. The video also showed Combs taking Cassie's phone and belongings, another move to isolate and control her. Defense claimed Combs was on a bad batch of substances that day, but Slavik pointed to the footage showing how composed he was when speaking to the security guard, Israel Flores, whom he tried but failed to bribe. Then came a text from Cassie sent to Combs after the attack. "When you get fucked up the wrong way, you always want to show me that you have the power and knock me around. I'm not a ragdoll, I'm somebody's child." Slavik reminded the jury of another terrifying moment in Cannes, France during the film festival. Cassie was kicked off the yacht Combs had rented, no passport, no belongings, because he accused her of stealing his substance. Later that night, they walked a red carpet together, and Combs dug his fingers into her dress, squeezing her thigh painfully throughout the event. On the flight back to New York, Cassie tried to sit apart from him, but Combs followed, cornered, and forced her to watch videos of past freak-offs on the plane that he had recorded. He threatened to release them. He spent the entire flight holding Cassie captive and making her watch videos that he had recorded of freak-offs. When the plane landed, he demanded a freak-off. Cassie complied, not because she wanted to, but because she believed that she had no choice. He had just threatened her about blackmail tapes, some of the most humiliating moments of her life. Prosecution said this is a textbook case of coercion even without physical violence, because coercion includes reputational harm, not just physical harm. The defense argued Ventura was an adult who made the choice to stay in a 10-year relationship, but Slavik hit back. The defendant created a climate of fear that can't be isolated to one moment in time. Cassie testified that she never truly understood what would happen if she said no. As she put it, "I didn't really know what no would be or what no would turn into." The prosecution told the jury that this wasn't consent, that it was survival. And then we know that substances were crucial and central to the coercion, right? Cassie testified that she never did a freak-off sober. The substances were numbing, disassociative. They made it easier to endure what she didn't want to endure. And when the defense tried to point out explicit text between her and Combs as proof of interest or consent, Slavik shut that down, saying it's not unusual for someone in love to send sexual messages. But Cassie also knew what to say to keep him happy. She knew that when he was happy, that she was safe. The jury saw a text from Combs that read, "You were supposed to be seducing me all day." Even her birthday wasn't her own. Slavik ended the Cassie section by returning to one of the most symbolic moments of control, which was her 29th birthday. Cassie didn't want to do a freak-off. She said no, but it didn't matter. Because despite saying no, despite not wanting to do it, Cassie left her own birthday party with the defendant for a freak-off. If the defendant wanted a freak-off, it was going to happen. And with that, Slavik posed her final question to the jury. It all comes down to this. What choice did Cassie have in the end? Viewed through the entire context of the relationship, Cassie did not have the freedom to make voluntary adult choices. And as Christy Slavik approached the close of her case, she circled back to where she started. This was never just about Sean Combs alone. Just like with everything else, he did not do it alone. To keep the freak-offs running like clockwork, he needed substances, cash, hotel rooms, men flown in from across the country, and people to keep Cassie and Jane compliant. And that's where his inner circle came in, what Slavik calls his most loyal lieutenants. And let's talk about them real quick. The first one we're going to talk about is Christina Coram, former chief of staff. She didn't just run logistics, she managed secrets. She set up hotel rooms, granted access to strange men. And when one assistant, Jonathan Perez, accidentally saw a video of Jane with an escort, Coram interrogated him. KK knew what was happening in those videos were wrong, but she did damage control. And can I just say, does anybody know where the hell Christina Coram is? I'm going to pose that question out there because she has been quiet. She's not been at this trial. The only things that I can think of is either she's next or she is secretly helping the prosecution to verify things. Those are the only things I can think of because she has been super quiet. All right. And then let's talk about D-Rock. And I'm using this picture for a reason. Again, if you're TikTok, you can't see the picture. For those of y'all who don't know, and I actually did not know this until tonight, so full transparency there. D-Rock, who is Combs' longtime security guard, was like best friends with Christopher Wallace, a.k.a. Biggie Smalls, Notorious B.I.G. I didn't know that till tonight. So this is a picture with Biggie because, let's give some respect to Biggie. But we want to show D-Rock as well. But he wasn't just there for show. He retrieved Cassie when she ran, confiscated her belongings, and tended to her injury. And it would be she said that it would be absurd to think that he didn't know what was happening for days at a time. Of course he knew, and not just D-Rock. She said all of them knew. All of them enabled it. They knew what he was doing, and they helped him do it. Then she moved on to counts 3 and 5, which is interstate transportation for prostitution. Slavik then walked the jury through those counts, which accuse him of transporting Cassie and Jane for the purpose of prostitution. To convict him on these charges, the jury must find 2 things. 1, he knowingly transported a person across state or international lines. That's easy. He did do that. 2, he intended for them to engage in a sex act for money. Slavik made it clear he paid for male escorts to fly across the country and the world for sexual encounters with Cassie and Jane, and she pointed to specific records. Escorts flown to New York, Miami, LA, and Ibiza. Bookings arranged by Combs himself. Payments made directly to escorts via Jane. To escorts or via Jane. Then you had one key escort, Jules, who was flown to New York in August of 2009 for a freak off with Cassie, fully arranged and paid for by Combs. The same man was present in 2016 during the elevator assault at the Intercontinental Hotel. Jane's participation was also backed by receipts. Sly, based in Atlanta, was flown to LA, Miami, and New York. Paul, a regular, was flown to Turks and Caicos in March of 2023. Combs even texted Paul directly by asking, "How do you want to handle payment?" Then there was another escort, arranged through Cowboys for Angels, who was flown in from Las Vegas to LA. Combs sent Jane the money. Jane forwarded it to the agency. The hotel later charged $4,000 in damages, including bodily fluid stains on the floor and furniture. I don't know if you guys knew that, if you missed that video, but there was like a $3,800 bill for bodily fluid stains on the floor and furniture. Bless the person who had to clean that up. Now, Christina Coram wasn't just booking rooms, she was coordinating sex parties under a nickname, Wild King Nights. Obviously, there's no question she knew what was going on because she helped book the rooms, facilitate travel for the escort, and deliver thousands of dollars in cash. At times, it seemed like KK was disapproving, but that doesn't matter because she knew exactly what was happening and made sure the defendant had everything he needed. The jury then heard a voice memo from Combs to Coram. "I want them to hunt for the sexiest, most unapologetic Wild King sex room in Vegas." Coram responded, "Is Paul coming to Vegas too?" Paul, the same entertainer who regularly performed hotel nights with Jane. As Christy Slavik neared the final stretch of her closing argument, she introduced one more key element of the racketeering conspiracy: forced labor. She told the jury that what happened to Cassie Ventura, Jane, Mia, and Capricorn Clark wasn't just abuse, that it was labor. It was exploitation. It was criminal. That the defendant forced Ventura and Jane into days-long sexual encounters without sleep. He made them sleep with multiple men, multiple times over multiple days. And the physical toll, they got sores. They got sick. They got infections. They got to a point where antibiotics, y'all, didn't work. Both women testified repeatedly that they suffered from urinary tract infections from the freak-offs, and sometimes they were still recovering from one when the next one began. This was not for Cassie's pleasure. This was work. And when they said that they were tired, sick, or in pain, he told them to keep going, told them to finish strong. His words. Then let's talk about Mia. Slavik then turns to Mia, Combs' former assistant, who wasn't just overworked, she was assaulted, sexually assaulted, physically abused, and psychologically broken. The defendant treated Mia differently than many of his other assistants. He demanded more, and then he abused her. Mia testified she was forced to perform oral, that Combs sexually assaulted her when Cassie and other girlfriends weren't around, that he had total power and control as her boss. He knew she couldn't say no. He knew she wouldn't say no. Mia told the jury that those assaults were the most traumatic experiences of her life, so much so that she planned to die with that secret. The abuse wasn't limited to sex. Combs threw objects at her, slammed her arm and door, threatened her job, which was her entire world at the time. And when he was done being violent, he used HR and other employees to punish her further. Mia saw and experienced extreme violence at her boss's hands. No wonder she was always worried about her physical safety if she said no. And Mia didn't go to law enforcement, not because she didn't want to, but because she believed, specifically in her words, that Combs was above the police. The defense tried to point to positive messages in posts Mia wrote about Combs, but Slavik reminded the jury that Mia testified sometimes the defendant treated her like his best friend, and other times like she was worthless. The high highs and the low lows that Mia described were a cycle of abuse that created a trauma bond. In that moment, Mia could see it for what it was. Then we talk about Capricorn Clark. She returned to Capricorn Clark, who was Combs' employee from 2004 to 2012, saying that she wasn't just emotionally manipulated or physically threatened, that she was also financially exploited. Combs used force against her. He threatened her job. He refused to pay her tens of thousands of dollars in overtime wages. Clark once calculated she was owed $80,000 in overtime and that Combs ripped up the paper in front of her and never paid her a dime. And HR did absolutely nothing. The Human Resources Department was a puppet for Combs. Even after 2012, Clark kept working for him, not out of loyalty, but out of necessity. Combs told her she would never work again, and he made sure it was true. He didn't just control the people in his orbit, he also controlled the industry around them. Now, Christy ended the government's closing argument not with shock, but with strategy. She told the jury that after Cassie Ventura filed her lawsuit in November of 23, Deshaun Combs panicked. Not because of a civil judgment, because he knew what was coming next, a federal criminal investigation. For years, the defendant took great pains to keep his criminal conduct from being exposed. Many of the crimes we've been speaking about were made public when Cassie filed her lawsuit. That's when, according to Slavik, Combs turned to his most trusted people, not to deny it, but to try to neutralize that threat. And that included Jane. Slavik played recorded calls between Combs and Jane captured from Christina Corum's phone, in which Combs tried to rewrite history. He fed Jane a false narrative. He knew it wasn't true. He just wanted to say it to protect him. That, according to Slavik, is witness tampering. When Jane didn't agree, when she pushed back, he cut her off. In the background of the recording, you can hear the sound of a Sharpie writing on paper because Corum was in the room, unable to speak out loud. She and Combs were passing notes to try to coordinate what to say. They were working together as a team. And then came the bait. Combs told Jane that she wouldn't have to worry about anything if she was on his side. 2 days later, he made sure Corum was still paying her rent. She helped cover up his crimes. He helped fabricate evidence. Then Slavik turned to Mia, another target, obviously, of Combs' post-lawsuit pressure campaigns. After Cassie's case went public, D-Rock, Combs' former head of security, reached out to Mia for the first time in over 2 years. What did he say? That Combs and Ventura just fought like a regular couple, that everyone else saw it the same way. They were working together to neutralize the Mia threat. Slavik showed D-Rock kept updating Combs on his conversations with Mia, sending him her messages and relaying a false version of events he tried to pressure her to accept, and eventually D-Rock offered her money. In February of 24, Combs himself called her 5 times in a row at 6 a.m. He then texted her, asking her to jog his memory as the criminal investigations became more and more real, saying the defendant kept trying to reach Mia. And at that point, Mia was already cooperating with federal investigators. She testified she felt terrified and threatened by Combs' persistence. Now, then came the final moment. Christina Slavik's close of a 7-week argument. She thanked the jury for their time. She acknowledged how grueling the testimony and evidence had been. You've seen how the defendant ran his criminal enterprise with total control and with the loyal assistance of his inner circle. She listed the witnesses, the messages, the videos, the financial records, the surveillance footage. She reminded them that the violence, the drugs, the trafficking, the manipulation, and the cover-up spanned 2 decades. Saying up until today, the defendant was able to get away with these crimes because of his money, his power, his influence. Then she gave them the line that closed the prosecution's case. That stops now. It's time to hold him accountable. Then the prosecution rested. Court was adjourned for the day. Now, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., it's the defense's turn. Mark Agnafila, who is the lead defense attorney, will be handling the closing arguments on behalf of Sean Combs. And of course, you all need to stay tuned and follow, because I'll be the one breaking it down in full from start to finish the moment that it's done, just like this. So with that said, you guys, if you are new here, whether you're watching Insta, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, please do me a solid. Hit that follow button. For YouTube, it's subscribe. Subscribe is the same as a follow. Please help me grow the platform. It's a free thing that you can do that helps, and especially if you want to make sure that you're up to date on this and up to date as soon as the verdict comes out. I promise you, I will be the one that's going to be right on it. And then, of course, we have the Kohberger case coming up shortly thereafter. We'll have about a month hiatus, and then Kohberger is going to start. So, again, please hit that follow button. And that being said, I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one.